Please be seated. The court is back in session. And international lit co-lawyer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a short observation, because I believe there was a slight problem in the interpretation into the English and into the French for the last answers of the witness, and I think it might be useful to the ascertainment of the truth that the witness may provide the name of the last guard he spoke about and who apparently fled to Vietnam and who apparently returned, because this was not very clear in the translation, and I would like the witness to provide us with the name of the guard whom he spoke about and who escaped to Vietnam and who recently passed away.
À poser cette dernière question.
If you allow me to put that last question to him, or if I may put it through you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And witness, please respond to that question. Do you recall the names of the guard who had a problem and fled to Vietnam and later on returns to become a policeman in Kandahar province? However, he is now deceased. What is the name of that man? Answer. His name is Joy. He was a former guard at S21. He fled from the prison and reached Vietnam. He returned from Vietnam in 1979 and became a policeman. He's now deceased. I never met him since he fled. However, cellmate told me about this event. President, thank you. And before I hand the floor to the defense teams, I noticed that Judge Laverne has some questions to put to the witness. You may proceed, Judge.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Witness, I have a few questions to put to you, a few follow-up questions. And first of all, I would like to speak about the film you spoke about this afternoon again. The film of the Vietnamese prisoners who arrived at S21. You said that this film was a summary, that their arrival had been filmed, that their interrogation had been filmed, and that their execution had also been filmed. Do you remember which methods were used to interrogate the prisoners as shown in the film? Did they use torture? Was torture filmed?
Yes, that is correct. Those Vietnamese soldiers who were arrested were tortured. And I saw blood stains on their body. Then the film was made of them. Besides that, I did not know any further details.
Est-ce que vous voulez dire que dans le film...
So you mean that in the film you would see interrogators torturing the prisoners, or in the film did you see Vietnamese prisoners who had blood on their clothes and who had wounds? What do you mean exactly? What did you exactly see?
When I went to this place, I saw them being walked to be interrogated. and I saw wounds on their back. But I did not know the details about the interrogations they engaged in, since I did not have the authority to go there.
Je voudrais revenir.
I would like to get back to the film precisely. You said that this film was screened during the training sessions. Now, in the film itself, did you see prisoners being tortured?
I did not pay attention to that. However, what I saw in the film was that they were ordered to work in a file, and later on they were executed and they were disemboweled.
So you mean that in the film you would also see the execution of these prisoners? Did you see them being disemboweled? Was that filmed? Or is this something that you saw outside of the film?
I saw it in the film. Ain was the group who made that filming, and the film actually had all those processes, that is including their interrogation and execution, and later on we were shown that film.
Quand on a projeté ce film, vous avez dit que
When this film was screened, and you said that it was screened during a training session, what comments were made? Did anybody make any comments about the film? Who was there when the film was being screened?
Everyone was there watching the film. They had a big screen there, but from my recollection there was no sound from the film.
hors dehors du...
Aside from the film, did you see photographers, S21 photographers, take pictures of bodies? Photographs of prisoners who had been executed. Do you remember that?
I cannot recall that. On the film, I saw photos of important people and of people who were emboweled, and that was the evidence to show that they had been executed.
Do you remember the names of the important figures you saw in the film? Were these figures people who had been detained at S21, or were they leaders?
What I saw was that Ta Pong's photo was amongst them, and the photo of Hunam was there as well.
Alors,
There might have been a slight interpretation problem. I heard the photograph of Hunim and the photograph of Takun, if I'm correct. So could you please repeat your answer? There was Hunim. So do you confirm that there was Hunim's photograph? And who in the other photograph was a photograph of whom?
I saw the photographs of Hu Num and Ta Pong.
And who was Tapon?
I am unsure of his position. The host said he was from the logistic section of the general staff.
In the film, once again, did you see interrogators strike the Vietnamese prisoners, beat them? Did you see them beat the Vietnamese prisoners?
No, I did not. What I saw was that they were being walked and they held their military helmets and uniforms on, and later on they were executed.
Est-ce que dans le film, il y avait des...
Were there images in the film of the prisoners confessing?
No, I did not see that. As I said, I did not see that.
Do you remember when you saw this film? Do you remember the date? Was it at the start of your work at S21 or rather towards the end?
I cannot recall it. It was during the study session, and that was on the 17th April of that year. Then we were shown that film.
So this is a film that was screened to celebrate the 17th of April. Is that what I must understand?
Yes, that is correct.
Vous avez dit...
You said that everyone was there. Can you tell us where the screening took place? Was it in a usual, ordinary room, or was this actually in a screening room? How many people watched this film?
It was in front of the prison along the road. That's where the film was screened. And those who watched the films, including those from Preso, the interrogators, and the staff of S21.
So this was an open air screening? And do you have an idea of how many people attended this screening? Was it a few dozen people, or were there hundreds of people?
There were hundreds of people who watched the film, since they included all the staff there and those staff from prison.
Was Duik there?
I did not pay that attention, but it was likely that he was there, since he actually conducted the training during that period, and that film was shown on the 17th April, so I presumed that he was there watching the film.
Were there any leaders at the screening? For example, Sun Sen.
No, he was not there. There were the host and the Doyen Taho and staff.
Est-ce que vous vous souvenez?
Do you remember if there were any Western prisoners at S21?
There were two of them. They had big build, and people said that they were Americans.
Est-ce que vous savez?
Do you know if they were executed? And if that is the case, do you know how they were executed?
They were taken and executed, and they rode to the north of the compound. There was a crossroad junction there, and that's where they were killed. At that time, after they were killed, there was an instruction to bury them, but the Dutch ordered Ho not to bury the dead bodies of foreigners, and that their bodies had to be burnt. At that time, I was on guard around the vicinity. There were those who wanted to go to inside the compound of S21, and people came to the east part of the Suez Canal where our house was located. Three of us were on patrol in each team, and at that time I saw the burning of the dead bodies.
If I understood you well, a priori speaking, all prisoners at S21 were buried normally, but these prisoners were burnt. Why? Why were they cremated? Is there a specific reason that you know explaining why they were cremated?
But
I heard her said that Dutch wanted to burn the bodies since they were the foreigners and they should not be buried, as the dead bodies may had some gas coming out. President interrupts. Witness, your testimony is rather confusing. You said at one point that the bodies should not be burned, but previously you said it should not be buried, and that you or some other people had to go and find firewood to cremate the bodies. So it is confusing, and it's very unlikely that your response is proper. Please make your response once again. Witness. The whole ordered the dead bodies to be buried, but then there was an order from Dutch not to bury them, so that they had to find firewood to cremate them, since foreigners had some gas from their dead bodies. And for that reason, they had to find some firewood from around the area or from the old walls of the buildings and bury them, and rather than burn them.
Can you tell us, witness, based on your recollection, how old was the youngest of the guards working at S21?
The age was about 15 years old.
Do you remember if there were collective marriages arranged for the S21 staff?
People who got married at S21, including about 6 couples, women were brought in from the garment section to marry the S21 staff. That evening they had a reception, and there were coconut juice and there were some chicken. On that day, Dutch also asked me whether I wanted to have a wife, and I said, what for? I did not want a wife. I thought that if I had a wife, there might be a problem for me. So those who got married all died except Pon. The rest all died. I meant both the husband and the wives, as well as their offspring.
So did you attend the weddings of these 6 couples?
As I said, I went there last, and it happens that they had the reception. There was a long table where they let out the food there with coconut juice. Who Israel was also there. So I actually joined them having meal together. And Dutch asked whether I wanted to have a wife, and as I said, I didn't know why I should have a wife. As I said that being alone was better than to have a wife. And later on, as I said, those couples all died except Pont and his family. They were arrested and detained there at the Tulslang.
As far as you remember, did the people who got married on that day know each other before?
They did not know each other before, but they were arranged to marry one another.
And who decided to arrange the marriages?
The one who made that decision was Dutch. Allow me to correct that two couples survived were Pon and his wife and Ho and his wife.
Est-ce que vous savez
Do you know if there were other detention places in Phnom Penh aside from S21?
No, I did not.
est-ce que vous aviez entendu
Did you ever hear about a prison next to the Wat Phnom?
No, I did not.
vous,
Earlier, you spoke about a former guard who became a prisoner who had fled. Do you know if other S21 prisoners were able to flee?
Please repeat your question.
Earlier, you spoke about a person by the name of Choi, I believe, and you told us that he managed to escape from S21. So what I would like to know is if, as far as you know, if there were other cases of prisoners at S21 managing to escape.
No, there was none.
vous avez
Did you also work as a messenger when you were at S21? Did you deliver messages ever?
When I went to bring people, that is the Vietnamese people from Svay Rieng, while we were en route and at Kraul Ku, Dutch messenger met me and asked me to take him to Son Sen's place, which was to the north of Svay Rieng province. So I got off the vehicle and I went with him to that place and to deliver that message to Son Sen, and then I returned.
When you were a guard or when you were working at S21, did you ever meet messengers who would come pick up messages or who would come deliver messages? And if that is the case, do you know whom these messengers were addressed to?
I did not know about that.
Est-ce que lorsque vous étiez à S21,
When you were at S21, did you attend meetings and sessions at locations other than at S21? For instance, did you attend meetings at the Olympic Stadium or at any other locations in Phnom Penh?
We were trained for study sessions conducted by Sun Sen at a location to the south of the Olympic Stadium, and that was the only occasion that I went there.
Ces sessions de formation, elles étaient exclusivement destinées aux...
Were those training sessions exclusively for S21 staff members or also for other persons?
It was a mixed session, as the school was full of other people from other locations that I did not know. And as I said, the venue was to the south of the Olympic Stadium.
Est-ce que vous savez quelles étaient les activités?
Do you know the activities of the other participants at those training sessions? Were those people from divisions, from other security centers? What can you say in that regard?
During that particular study session, all the participants were all soldiers. They were all soldiers.
Mais est-ce que ces soldats, pour certains, est-ce qu'ils...
But were some of those soldiers working in other security centers? First of all, are you aware of the existence of other security centers apart from S21?
I did not know about that. I did not know where they were from. I was there just to attend and join the study session.
Bien, une dernière question.
Very well. This is my last question, witness. During the training sessions, were magazines published during democratic Cambodia, such as the Youth Revolutionary Flag or the Revolutionary Flag?
Regarding the study session, the subject of the discussion was the building of the country and agricultural production, military strategies, including the sending the forces in a specific location, particularly to Joromochru, to fight against the Vietnamese, and the inside the rank enemies were also discussed in that study session.
Et qui étaient désignés comme étant des ennemis?
And who are those designated as the enemy that had infiltrated the ranks?
It was Sun Sen who made a mention that we should be careful of infiltrated enemies. That was the public discussion on the subject.
Et est-ce que vous avez entendu parler d'une revue qui s'appelait...
And did you hear of a magazine called the Revolutionary Flag? and the revolutionary youth?
Yeah.
Yes. They mentioned about the Youth Revolutionary magazine and also revolutionary magazines. They were the magazines of the country.
Est-ce que vous savez qui, parmi le personnel,
Do you know who among the staff of S21 were members of the CPK, as the Communist Party of Kampuchea? Were you yourself a member of the Communist Party of Kampuchea?
No. Members of CPK include Ho Hoi and not others.
donc il y avait simplement
So, among the staff of S21, only 3 or 4 persons were members of the CPK? Is that what I should understand from your testimony?
Jaime, but he was arrested and killed. Paul was also a member of that party. These were the members of the CPK, and I do not know whether other staff members were part of the CPK as well.
dans votre souvenir,
To the best of your recollection, while you were working at S21, did it happen that you didn't have enough food for the staff of S21?
At the outset, we had gruel, and later on, together with the messengers and cadres who had been arrested with other forces, were sent to Chiang Ek to participate in the agricultural production, and later on, after we had the good yield, we were able and we were provided with rice, cooked rice to eat.
est-ce que le personnel de S21 avait
Did the staff of S21 receive the same quantities of food as the detainees, or they received different quotas of food or food rations?
Prisoners, I mean only the carpenters and mechanics had the cooked rice to eat. Even the staff members, they had a different amount of meals to eat and also dishes. For example, compared to interrogators, sometimes we had less dishes to eat.
et d'après ce que vous avez vu,
And from what you were able to observe, did the prisoners also have less to eat?
Those prisoners, I mean Tata, had cooked rice to eat. However, for the inmates, I mean the prisoners inside the cells, they had only watery gruel to eat.
je vous remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Mr. President, I have no further questions for the witness.
President, thank you, Judge. And the floor is now given to the defense team for the accused, starting first from the defense team for Mr. Nguyen Chi. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, witness. I will be asking you questions on behalf of Nguyen Chi. Let me start by asking you some questions about the punishment you received in the early 1980s. And let me read to you a small excerpt from a document, and then I will ask some questions about this. Mr. President, that is E3/9195. It's an article I referred to earlier from DC Chem, English ERN 001049111, and Khmer, it's a partial translation, 00340092. Mr. Witness, this DC Chem article, this excerpt reads as follows. Beginning in 1980, most former S-21 comrades were re-educated. Some of them were arrested and sent to prisons. Susti, who kept lists of prisoners' names, was detained in a high security prison for 4 years by Kandal province authorities after the regime was defeated. Him Hui, who was deputy chief of the guard unit, was imprisoned in Kandal province for 2 years. End of quote. Let me start by asking you, Mr. Witness, were you yourself re-educated? And if yes, what exactly did you have to do in order to be re-educated?
The re-education at the prison was to carry water, brush the rubbish, clean up the rubbish, carrying bags of rice onto the vehicles, and also to harvest and transplant rice.
Did you also, during that re-education in the early 1980s, have to do some form of self-criticism?
I have been a panic after the Pol Pot regime, so I did not contest or protest to any forms of labor after the regime. President interrupts. I guess that the President has a different question in relation to the time when you were imprisoned in the 80s, the early 80s, perhaps in 1981, while you were imprisoned in Kandahar province. Did you, were you required to perform any kind of labor? Answer, I was imprisoned, and during the imprisonment, I ate and slept in that prison. President interrupts. Do you understand the term self-criticism? And was there self-criticism held during the time that you worked at S21? Answer. We had meetings in the evenings For those who did not committed any kind of mistakes, they had to be there in the meeting as well. Question: what about during the time when you were imprisoned in Kandahar province after 1980? Were you required to attend the self-criticism session? Answer: at the time, there were no such meetings. However, we were told not to flee from the prison, and we were also told to work while being imprisoned. President: you can now resume your questioning because the witness a while ago did not respond to your question, and I just put some clarification question instead of you. You can now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Were you, in fact, as this article seems to suggest, imprisoned in Kandal for 2 years?
Witness, could you repeat your question?
Certainly. Were you, as this article seems to suggest, imprisoned for 2 years in Kandal province?
Yes.
And were you convicted or were you punished for the things you did at S21 or punished for the things you did at Chiang Ek?
I did not know while I was there. I carried dirt and soil.
Did they ask you to do certain things for you in order for you to be released? Were there any conditions put on you before you were released?
There was a condition suggesting and warning me not to committing the faults again, and I was encouraged to try to provide food for my family members and also for my children.
Were you also encouraged to speak about your time at S21 to anyone, to film crews or to journalists or to anyone?
I cannot recall it, Counsel.
Do you know if it is correct what this article seems to suggest, that Susti was detained in a high security prison for 4 years?
President, Mr. Witness, please hold on. You have the floor first. Lead co-lawyer for civil parties. Mr. President, Your Honors, the questions lastly put by the defense team are not within the scope of our trial. I therefore would like to register my objections to those questions. And if Copper thinks that those questions are within the scope of our trial, I would like to ask him to provide a reference in which paragraphs did those kind of things fall into.
The purpose of my questions are twofold, Mr. President. First, they go to questions of reliability. We're trying to find out whether there were any conditions put on him by the then authorities, urging him to say certain things about the events at S21 or Chong Ek. It also goes to establishing whether he has in fact a right to incriminate himself or not to incriminate himself, excuse me. It also goes to what generally was done to S21 guards and cadres, and I think is relevant to establish also for the upcoming witness if it is true that he was in fact convicted to 4 years in a high security prison. I don't intend to dwell on it too much, but I think we should know for all kinds of reasons what exactly happened in terms of punishment in relation to former S21 cadres.
But Council, you will not ask for more time in the end because other more relevant questions didn't make it into the scheduled time.
Thank you for your sarcasm again, Judge Fens.
The objection is overruled. Go ahead.
Mr. Witness, do you know whether Sus T was convicted to 4 years and served his time in a high security prison?
After I fled and left the forest, I did not make any communication or contact with anyone. I did not know who else were imprisoned. And later on, I was invited by Ratipan to gather with other people to be filmed. And from that occasion onwards, I learned that he was imprisoned in that location as well. After the imprisonment, each and every one of us was trying to make our living for our wife and children, so we had no time to go and had the communication or contact with one another.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Let me move on to my next subject. Did you at one point in time leave S21, and I mean in the period before 7 January 79, did you at one point in time stop working as a outside guard or a special unit person?
In mid-1978, I was removed to work at the field, and Hall says that those who were assigned to work the field had to focus on the work, and that applies to other at the center as well. So during that time, I was working, digging, working the field, transplanting the rice and harvesting the rice. I had to do the work while raining as well. And after 1979, I left the area to the location where the heavy weapons were stored, and at the time upon I left that location, I went back to Preso and to Cheung Ai, and at the time I heard that the Vietnamese had already been in Chaba Ampho location, and I was warned that we would have no escape very soon, since Vietnamese were now approaching the location, and at the time I went to the west.
Were you removed from S-21? Were you sanctioned from, and when you were sent mid-78 to go work at Presar? What was the underlying reason? Do you know?
Let me tell you, Counsel, I was punished at the time because Nguyen implicated me that I had a plan. And as I told you, weapons had been removed and placed in the warehouse of the General Staff. Jet was within the same group as mine, and it was said that Jet was very stubborn, and I asked her that Jet should be kept there for a while so that I could refashion. I felt pity on him that he could go and work at the field. Later on, although he was not punished and allowed to work at the field and grow morning glory, he hung himself and committed suicide because he thought that he would be killed one day. And while I was working at the field, I was thinking to myself that I would one day be arrested, and thanks to her that I was not arrested at the time.
In your testimony, E3/7462, your testimony in case 001, at about 14:48 in the afternoon, you said, the question is, Mr. Him Huim, I'm trying to make sure that the trial chamber understands clearly. When you were sent to the rice field, was that Presar? And then you answer, I was put to plant rice in Phnom Penh because I was told that Comrade Nun implicated me in his confession. Nun, who exactly is that? Is that Hui, or is that someone else?
Nop Nguyen, that was the person named Nguyen, Nop Nguyen. He was the former messenger of a cadre, and after the cadre had been arrested, he was also sentenced to S-21. In fact, he was first working as a guard, as I was working at the time. Later on, Nguyen was arrested, and I, after that time, was sent to work the field as well. President, thank you.
One question, just to finish the subject, Mr. President, thank you. Duik, in that same hearing, says that you were a trusted cadre and that you were still working at S-21 on the 7th of January. Can you give a reaction to that?
I I did not believe in what Dutch said. Dutch and Ho had a brawl or conflicts on 3 occasions. After the conflicts or brawls, members of 703 were arrested. Hui was first arrested, then Ho, and I, together with other members of 703, were all arrested. President, thank you. Now it is an appropriate time for the adjournment. The Chamber will resume its hearing on the Thursday, 5 May 2016 at 9 a.m. Tomorrow, the Chamber will continue hearing Mr. Him Hui. Please be informed and please be on time. Thank you, Mr. Him Hui. The hearing of your testimony as a witness has not come to an end yet. You are therefore invited to come and testify once again tomorrow. I am grateful to you as well, Mr. Momratia, the Duty Counsel. You are also invited to come here to assist the witness tomorrow. Court officers, please work with the West Zoo unit to send Mr. Him Hui to the place where he is currently staying. And please invite him into the courtroom tomorrow to testify. The security personnel are instructed to bring Kyusapon and Nunchia back to the detention facility of the ECCC and have them returned into the courtroom before 9 a.m. The court is now adjourned.